That's backwards. I did that again now. You can't read what's on my computer, but I'm going to tell you what that says, that jargon. And if you can read it backwards, I'm super impressed. But that says, we do employee engagement different. And that is the new landing page for my next webinar that's coming up next Thursday. It was supposed to be next Wednesday. I decided to make a couple changes, which I'm really excited about as I prepare for that. And so it's actually going to be on next Thursday at 1 p.m. Mountain Time, which is 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's going to be all about employee engagement. And the actual title of the webinar, I've got the little tagline, we do employee engagement different. Because I'm going to be going through why everything that you've been told about employee engagement is wrong. And then how leading different is just the change that your team needs. Because, and I'll talk about this on the webinar, but I don't know if you know, you probably do, or if you don't know, this won't surprise you. There is a boatload of money that is spent on employee engagement. Like a lot. Whether it's from surveys to beanbag chairs to office renos to different perks. And despite all of the money and all the time being poured into this whole thing called employee engagement, it's not working. At least not much. In fact, employee engagement, you could probably argue, is getting worse because of how stagnant it is over the past 10 years at least. And I've got a really good reason of why that's the case, but the good news is I also have a solution for it, and it doesn't involve spending a whole heck of a lot of money. So if you're running an organization and you are spending tons and tons of dollars on employee engagement, you're doing it wrong. And if you're a manager and you think that your company needs to spend more money, or think your company is doing a great job because they're spending money on this whole employee engagement thing, you're doing it wrong. And maybe this will be a little bit controversial. I highly doubt everyone is going to agree with me, but I'm really excited to kind of talk employee engagement and what I've seen work, what I know works from experience, and what I keep hearing are the secrets to actual, real, tangible results when it comes to employee engagement. So I'm really excited, and thanks for the thumbs up, whoever that was. I can't actually see that, but yeah, so that's going to be next Thursday, and you should sign up. You should just go over to yourbestmanager.com/webinar, and you can join me on Thursday, June 15th for why everything you've been told about employee engagement is wrong, and why or how leading different is exactly the change that your team is looking for. Other than that, again, if you don't know who I am and you're watching this for the first time, my name is Jamie Newman. I am the founder of yourbestmanager.com and the host of the Your Best Manager podcast, which you can find on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play, anywhere that podcasts are. And every Monday I teach a leadership lesson, and then Wednesdays and Fridays I bring on some of the world's top leadership experts and do 30-minute interviews, and it's a lot of fun. But we are right now on day 10 of the What If project, and I'm sitting in my living room at home. It is 5:11 p.m., obviously if you're watching this live. So we're about to make dinner, but I thought I'd come on real quick to give today's What If tip. And if you've read any part of the description already, it's what if all managers everywhere were more human. And this actually goes back to episode 11 of the Your Best Manager podcast, where I talked with a man named Terry Starbucker St. And if you're wondering where Starbucker comes from, I explained it during that interview, but he embodies his core philosophy, which is more human leadership. And what it is, so I asked him about it was either maybe the biggest challenge he faced or his proudest moment, but I think they probably go hand in hand. And he told a story about how he had, he was basically the leader, and they had taken over a new company or purchased a new company that had poor leadership before. So he was walking in as the new guy, and the past leadership had been very negative and had created a poor culture where there was not a lot of trust between employees and management. And so the challenge was, how do you rebuild that? And you can listen to the story. I've got the link to the podcast. I won't steal his thunder because he's definitely going to share it better than I do. But the simple version is he started going into work earlier than he needed to. So I think the workers would start the shift at 6. He would go in at 6 with coffee and donuts, and he would just chat with the workers. about like life, about what questions they had, about anything that came up. He intentionally went into where his employees were at, not into a corporate nice executive office every morning. He would go in on a regular basis and just simply build relationships. And what that did was that allowed him to be seen as more human. And lo and behold, I mean, you can just gather that, well, hey, if you look more human, if you build relationships, it's going to work. That all makes sense intellectually up here. The challenge is, though, people actually struggle with this more than you think. The idea of more human leadership seems to make so much sense, and it's one of those things that I talk about quite a bit, about how it's simple, but it's not easy. And this is especially a trap that new managers fall into. Because what happens is you've been promoted to a leadership role, or even if you've already been in a leadership role, and what ends up happening is you've got this desire to look like you deserve to be where you're at. And you've got this desire to have the answers because your employees look to you, so you want to have the right answers. And when it comes to performance, you want to look good because you want people to trust and follow you. And especially when you've been promoted, you want people in the office to be like, yeah, that guy deserved, or that girl, she deserved that promotion. I'm glad that she's in that role. So what do? You try and look good. And so you try and have all the answers, and you obviously don't. You've just been promoted, and even if you are a senior leader, you don't have all the answers, and you probably know that. But you don't want to necessarily show all your flaws because, well, what will people think if they see me make mistakes? Or what will people think if I can't answer that question? And so what comes as a noble, understandable pursuit to look good and to represent the title you've been given well turns into distance. And I talk about this when it comes to my philosophy of shoulder-to-shoulder leadership. So what happens is the manager and the employees distance themselves. And so instead of going to work with your team, you go to work and run into your office. And instead of working on the front lines, you shout orders from the back telling them what to do. And when it comes to training, when it comes to correction, when it comes to performance management, instead of showing people how, instead of going where they're at and being more human, you try and fix everything through sending emails or through reprimands or through, well, these are the expectations. I'm going to chart it. I'm going to graph it. And you overmanage, and that's where the whole term of micromanagement comes into play. And it's actually very, very common. So the solution is kind of obvious. Be more human. Be a human. Build that relationship. Be willing to get outside of your comfort zone, be vulnerable and make mistakes because humans make mistakes. And obviously the downside to that distance will be people won't want to follow you, but I can tell you firsthand, I have heard managers referred to as robots, and maybe you've been referred to as a robot. And that hits on 2 points. The first point is, if all anybody ever sees is good stuff, they're going to think you're a robot. You can't make mistakes, and therefore your level of success is unattainable. The other side, that's actually the best case scenario, is that people think you're too good. The worst case scenario is people will think that you're unrelatable. Because you are a robot, because you don't seem to have flaws, because you've distanced yourself so far, you're going to struggle with trust and you're going to struggle with leadership because people won't actually know who you are because you're not being human. And so the what if tip is, what if everyone was just more human? Or as Terry Starbucker described in his interview, which again, I definitely recommend you listen to. The guy's phenomenal. And it literally, when you're talking to him or when I'm talking to him, he just sounds real. It just sounds like we're having a cup of coffee, just talking about leadership. It's just so raw and good. So definitely recommend listening to it. But do what he did. Show up with coffee and donuts when you don't need to, and just build a relationship. Or at the end of the day, bring in pizza into your office or into your work and just hang out for 10, 15 minutes. Talk about stuff that's unrelated and build that relationship. But if you really want to make an impact, you got to get on those front lines. You got to work side by side or shoulder to shoulder with your team. And you got to be willing to make mistakes with them so that you can lead through doing, through being, versus lead through telling and lead through directive management. So hope that is helpful for you on this Saturday. Hopefully you can walk into Monday, if you work a typical 9 to 5, thinking about being more human versus thinking about being good or looking good. If you can be vulnerable, you're going to have a lot more impact on the people that you lead than if you're not. And as I said, go sign up for that webinar. It's going to be good. I'm really hoping that somebody comes on that webinar who disagrees with me, because I'm talking about literally, I think the entire industry of employee engagement is backwards. And it is an industry. There's a lot of money in employee engagement, and I don't think it's working. And so, I mean, you can look around your office, you can look around your team, and is everyone engaged? Because the stats say that 70% of U.S. workers, and I'm assuming the same for Canada, the same for Australia, Europe, doesn't matter. I think actually worldwide it's worse. I think I saw a stat that 87% worldwide employees are disengaged. And so I think I've got pretty safe ground to say that most of what's being taught about employee engagement is not what's actually going to make a difference. So I hope to see you there. That's going to be next Thursday. And other than that, have a fantastic Saturday evening. And I'll see you again tomorrow with this What If project. Oh, and to register for the What If project, if you haven't, it's yourbestmanager.com/whatif. Have a great night.